Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I am here with Tana, and we are here with our good friend, Dave Asprey. Thank you for being with us. We're so excited. Dave is the founder and CEO of Bulletproof, the world's first human performance and nutrition company. He's also the creator of Bulletproof Coffee, the host of the #1 health podcast, Bulletproof Radio, a Silicon Valley investor and technology entrepreneur who spent 2 decades and over $1 million to hack his own biology. Amen Clinics was actually part of that. Dave created Bulletproof Coffee and the Bulletproof Diet out of a sense of self-preservation. For much of his life, Dave was overweight and struggled with multiple autoimmune diseases and cognitive decline. After decades of dieting and calorie counting, Dave switched strategies, applying tools and tactics from the worlds of human physiology, nutrition, and burgeoning technologies. With a new understanding of human biology, Dave hacked his health to lose 100 pounds, increase his IQ, and lower his biological age. Dave has a new book called Headstrong, which I've already read and endorsed. I think it's awesome. And he is going to be with us this week where we are going to talk about his biohacking journey. We're also going to talk about the brain and business. We're going to talk about the mitochondria and much more. So welcome, Dave.
Yeah, welcome. So exciting to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor. When I was really struggling with my brain, back when I weighed closer to 300 pounds versus 100 pounds of fat that I've lost, I was really kind of desperate. I was just about failing out of Wharton, my business school. And I got a SPECT scan done after reading, I believe it was your first book. This is going back like 15 years or something. And man, it absolutely set me on a different path. So I'm to be able to be on your show here a number of years later it's an honor, and I really appreciate your work.
Oh, it's so awesome.
Well, thank you so much. And, as I always say, if you don't look at the brain, you don't know. And you can come up with all sorts of interesting theories about why you're not doing well. So you read Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, and then you got a SPECT scan. What was that like for you?
Well, I was already taking some nootropics back then, and I'd already been really working hard. I'd lost a bunch of the weight that I needed to lose, but I was really struggling, and I was concerned that I might not be able to hang in business school. And I started telling myself, well, I'm working full time. This is an executive program. I'm in here with a lot of these smart people. It's a top school. And maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am, right? Like maybe I'm just not going to make it. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough. And I was actually kind of feeling a little bit stupid. And some of that's self-confidence related, but some of it's because my test scores were crappy. And when I went in and I sat down with a psychiatrist. I didn't have a chance to I went with someone who trained with you, who was certified by you, but I hadn't met you yet. And it was pretty clear that he thought I was hitting him up for Adderall, which a lot of business students will do. A lot of college students are trying to take this as a performance enhancer, even though it's not an appropriate use of that drug. And when I came back after I got the injection in the arm and did the scan, he looked at my brain scan and he said, Dave, you have the best camouflage of anyone I've ever met. Inside your brain is total chaos. I don't even know how you're standing here in front of me. And
that's funny.
The conversation shifted. I was an interesting referral, according to the Silicon Valley brain imaging guys. And this was scary on one hand, but on the other hand, I got to tell you, Daniel, it was absolutely liberating because I'm a computer hacker by training. The first guy to sell anything over the internet, it was a t-shirt that said caffeine, my drug of choice. It was me, like the first e-commerce product ever. Like I'm a geek. And that minute when I heard that, I was like, literally, I almost had like a tear in my eye. I'm like, finally, someone believes me, because the doctors didn't believe that. I'm like, no, but something's not right in there. And then it went from being like, oh, it's not that I'm not trying. It was like, oh, I have a hardware problem. It's like Like if you're writing code on your computer trying to fix it, but the processor is not getting enough power, well, what do you think is going to happen? And that's what it was for me. It shifted from moral failing to basically a hackable problem. And that's informed a lot of my work, which is that we have way more control over our biology, and that our consciousness, our thinking, our thoughts, our emotions, everything, they are emergent properties that come out of our energy production in the body. You don't make enough energy, you won't have enough energy to regulate your emotions. You don't make enough energy, you won't have enough willpower. And that was what inspired me to write Headstrong, was just how do you manage that energy that powers the brain first and foremost?
That's awesome. That was actually a really good way to describe it too. The hardware, if your processor is not working right, I really like that. That was a really good description. That when people come in here, we notice they have that same feeling of relief. And so I like the way you said that.
That's why I got hooked on imaging, because almost immediately people lost their shame, they lost their guilt, and they went, oh, it's medical, not moral. Yeah. And they became more compliant with what I asked them to do. So I love that part. Because I know part of the story is mold exposure, and that's what caused some of the damage. We're going to do a whole podcast on mold. Dave actually produced a fabulous movie called Moldy that I think everybody should watch, because it's an epidemic problem that very few people actually know about or take serious.
Well, before we go, though, I mean, I just at least have to know. So things got better at school.
Oh, no, we're just starting. So I want to know the big.
You can't leave me hanging.
The big biohacking lessons, and then, of course, for Tana's sake, tell her the rest of the story.
Well, here's the rest of the story. I found out that when I was working to pay attention, that there was just about no metabolic activity in my prefrontal cortex. So what would happen is I would sit down to take a test, and the first question I get 100%, second question I get like 60%, third question 20%, and after that I couldn't even write. like it was a linear decline. And like, what is going on here? And I felt dumb, really dumb. And then when I'm like, oh, no wonder there's like no blood flow in my prefrontal cortex when I work to pay attention. That explains it. And all of a sudden it wasn't that I was dumb. So they have a name for the guy who graduates at the very bottom of medical school, like the very lowest grade.
Right.
And you know what that is, right?
Doctor,
right? Well, same thing in business school. So MBA, right? So I probably wasn't at the very bottom of my class. We'll say I wasn't near the top, but my goal was to be near the top. My goal was to get an MBA and learn what I wanted to learn and ignore everything I didn't care about and still pass, because that was more effective and more efficient. Even though that probably irritated some of my finance professors. Sorry, guys. And so I did graduate. And what was really touching is I got a chance to meet, this is probably 8-9 years after this had really changed my life, I had a chance to meet Daniel at Joe Polish's Genius Network conference. And I just went up and said, wow, I get to shake your hand and say thank you, because you have no idea how much you've changed my life. Like, a lot of my biohacking journey came about from switching this from being like, I need more cognitive enhancers, or I just need more willpower, to, oh no, I need to fix the hardware, and then I'll work on the willpower. Then I'll work on the voice in my head and work on dealing with past trauma and all that stuff. And it was interesting, because when you actually saw my real brain scans, I remember you said, Dave, if I saw your brain and I didn't know who you were, I would think that you were living under a bridge doing drugs. I was like, wow, okay. I felt like I was.
That's so funny.
I did graduate, and I was working at a startup that ended up selling for $600 million. I was working full time while getting my MBA.
That's awesome.
I was succeeding. And the point here, everyone listening to this, if you did a SPECT scan right now, I guarantee you, well, actually, you guys know, but the vast majority of people do not have super healthy looking brains. They're still good people. They're still performing well. Like, they're still doing good things, but they're not everything they could be. And that's what I want to get to come through here. Even in Headstrong, the idea is, the subtitle, The Bulletproof Plan to Activate Untapped Brain Energy. The thing is, it's always there, but you don't know it's there because you never tapped into it. Right. It's sort of like, if you're living on a property with an oil well that could be in the backyard, but isn't. And one day, like, oh, there's some oil. Then all of a sudden you have limitless energy and flowing in your backyard, but you just don't know. And I think it's there for everyone. And some people have a huge amount. And some people just have 20, 30% more energy. But like, what else is more precious than that?
I actually love that you said that, because when I met Daniel, I didn't believe in ADD. I thought like it was a religion or something. I was like, it's nonsense, and it's an excuse for people to fail. It's an excuse to not try. I did not believe in it at all. I thought you just needed to work harder, try harder. And when my family got scanned, I'm like, oh my God, this explains my entire life. So all the chaos, trauma. But it did the exact same thing that you just said. What I love about what you just said was I was actually succeeding. I just didn't realize how hard I was having to work to do it. I didn't even know how hard I was having to work until after we got it straightened out. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew I could be so much more, or I didn't have to work quite as hard at it.
Well, and there's a mantra that we all repeat. It's like try harder. And here's the thing. When you get your brain working all the way, the try harder goes away and you just do it. And it feels effortless. Like the amount of struggle in my life has gone down by like 90%. And the amount of big things I can do that like help a lot of people has gone up dramatically.
Right.
And it's because of getting that out of the way. Because every time you try it, you're burning mitochondrial energy. Like you're actually taking energy that could have gone to doing something just to try to do something. And it's because there's internal resistance. And a lot of that internal resistance isn't, thought patterns. It's actually energy that underlies the thought patterns. And that energy is a known system, at least mostly known, and it's hackable. So it's like you can take your car and it's kind of slow and you take it into the race car mechanic and they bolt a couple things on, change the fuel, and all of a sudden you have a car that's twice as fast.
Right. I love that. That's actually great. It's a great description.
So what Dave described in looking at his scan, when we do a concentration scan, we actually have them doing a task. And in, quote, healthy brains, not normal, because normal's not common, his brain started to turn off when he started to concentrate rather than turn on. And it's that deactivation that occurs in people who have ADD that begins to explain their whole life, because the harder they try, the worse it gets.
The chaos, the drama, the craving caffeine, all of that.
And there's a lot of negative mind stuff around that deactivation pattern. And when you turn it back on, we'll talk about that coming up, it can just make a radical difference. One of my favorite stories is a woman who said, I can't believe just fixing that one thing caused my children from going to people that I hated trying to manage to, oh, aren't they cute?
Right.
It's
amazing.
Just amazing how it changed her life, and grateful that it changed your life. Dave,
I did want to, just one complaint. I lost some muscle mass in one part of my body as a result of this. The muscles in my middle finger totally got atrophied after this.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yes.
You are a man after my own heart. That's hilarious.
Forethought will do that.
That's
Dave
great.
Asprey's new book is called Headstrong. It's available for pre-order. The website, Dave, is
orderheadstrong.com.
orderheadstrong.com. The flagship Bulletproof Coffee Shop is now open in Santa Monica. There's a second location in downtown Los Angeles coming soon.
I just have to say one thing about Bulletproof Coffee. So I really love Bulletproof Coffee. It was such a great idea. But you guys sponsored one of our events, and of course, you hire the best people. They were amazing, and everyone at our event just absolutely loved them. They were just adorable. But I love it because it's not too much caffeine, and it's loaded with this great stuff, the MCT oils, and it's just in the short chain fatty acids, and it tastes great. It's like the perfect amount of coffee, and it's just delicious. And it's not this like, venti sized thing that's going to just amp you up like crazy. It's just the right amount, and it's really yummy. So,
all right. When we come back, we're going to talk about amping your brain by strengthening your mitochondria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Tana and I are here with our friend Dave Asprey, author of Headstrong, coming soon. Also, the founder and CEO of Bulletproof, the creator of Bulletproof Coffee, the host of the #1 health podcast, Bulletproof Radio. We are having so much fun with Dave now that his middle finger, the muscle there, is atrophied.
So people who have not been listening are not exactly sure what you're talking about.
They will figure it out. And we've been talking about biohacking your brain. And the first step, obviously, is to look at your brain, because if you don't look, you don't know. But there are these little pieces of your cells called the mitochondria that have really become very interesting to you. Can you talk about how you learned about them, what hurts them, what helps them, and why that really took center stage in Headstrong?
Over the past almost 20 years, I've spent about $1 million on hacking my own biology. And this is because I am a professional biohacker. It's not necessary to do that to get control of your biology, but I'm oftentimes experimenting. I'm using brand new therapies. Now, at this point, the SPECT scan is a respected and proven technology. At the very early days when I had this done, it was like, a what scan? No one's ever heard of this before. So I'll always go to the new cutting edge things. And I realized when I look back over all of the problems that I've experienced, and I had chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, all of those were toxic mold related, by the way, arthritis, cognitive dysfunction, high risk of stroke and heart disease. There's a common uniting element of all of those things. It's inflammation, and the uniting element behind that is mitochondria. So these mitochondria, 2 billion years ago, these were free floating little red bacteria. And through some strange fluke that we're still debating how this happened, they merged with the cells that are us. Now, the story you heard in high school, if you remember this stuff, is that we harnessed them to become the power plants of our cells. The story that is more accurate, at least from the way things work, is that these little guys saw our cells and said, hey, look, a petri dish. Let's move right in and take over. So in your brain, you have about 15,000 of these tiny little red former bacteria in each neuron, in each cell in the brain. And in the heart, you have 15,000. And in the eyes, you have 15,000. And the rest of your body, you have a few hundred to a couple thousand. So the parts of the body that require the most energy for life have the most of these power plants, or you could also call them batteries. So 10% of your body weight is mitochondria. And there's about a quadrillion of these, way more than there are bacteria in your gut. And they listen to the environment. These are semiconductors. They're light sensitive, they're magnetically sensitive, they're heat sensitive, they're vibration sensitive, and they make light. They actually can talk to each other with little biophotons. They're fascinating. And what these little things do is they control which genes get expressed. They power hormone production. And if you're going to have a thought in your mind, something has to make enough electrons for you to have a little spark across the synaptic gap. And what's going on here is these guys really are in charge. They don't listen to you very well. They'll sense your stress levels if you're stressed about your mother-in-law or your job or whatever else. But they'll listen more closely to whether or not it's bright light at midnight and they think it should be nighttime. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is there too much physical stress? And they're constantly checking millions of times a second to see what's going on, and then talking with each other and deciding how much energy you're allowed to have. If you're ready in fight or flight mode to run away, then they're going to take energy and they're going to basically set the battery up in your body for running instead of setting up the battery in your body for recovery, repair, restoration, for making hormones, for producing new proteins. So you end up realizing, wow, if I manage the stuff that these little guys listen to, they're going to make my life a lot easier. If you, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Okay. If you're one of these tiny ancient bacteria, you have only really 4 things that you need to do. And this is why I wrote Headstrong. And these rules apply for the largest mammal and the tiniest life form. Number one, run away from or kill scary things. But this is a basic rule for life, like protect yourself. Number two, eat everything. And when I was 300 pounds, I certainly did that more than I would like. This means don't allow famine to kill your species, which is the rule. The other rule is make sure you reproduce quite frequently. That's another thing that might get us in trouble sometimes. And the fourth thing that really I'm discovering more and more is build a community. Mm-hmm. And this is why we get biofilms that form from bacteria. And this is why you get packs of dogs and we get tribes of people and even political parties and stuff like that. So it turns out that those four behaviors are amplified from a quadrillion ancient bacteria all the way up, and those become our instincts and our behaviors. In my work in the creation of cloud computing and artificial intelligence, my undergrad degree is in a subcategory of artificial intelligence. We look at something called emergent phenomena. And what's going on here is when you get those four rules repeated a kabillion times, technical term, what you end up with is the ego. You end up with the automatic negative thoughts, the way you write in your books, Dr. Heyman. These things, they're actually coming from these core instincts. Well, you then take all this extra energy in your brain, your human brain, your smart brain that understands what's a threat, what's not a threat, and you use it to control, impulse control. Well, it turns out that if these things have enough energy because you feed them right and because you train them right and you make the environment right, their stress level goes down. And then all of a sudden they set your biology up for success. And then you have fewer automatic negative thoughts. And then that frees up even more energy. So you end up both turning up the amount of energy because they're wasting this energy freaking out about the environment they didn't need to. And it makes you happier and it makes you a nicer person. And that's why I wrote Headstrong, because when people have enough energy, they're nicer to each other. Like, we're wired to build community, but only after we make sure that we ate enough, we killed scary things, and we had a mate. And after that, we'll be nice to people. So just enough energy makes us nicer.
So what are the things that hurt our mitochondria?
One of the biggest things is toxins. And toxins come from man-made toxins. They also come from nature-made toxins. There's been an ancient war between bacteria and fungus. Antibiotics are byproducts of fungus, of mold, and they kill bacteria. Well, if 10% of our body weight is ancient bacteria, you can imagine that Mother Nature's toxins that come from certain types of mold might be really bad for us. So is glyphosate, the toxin that we're spraying on our soil and our food for weed control. So is mercury that they used to put in your mouth from dentists. These things, even the toxins that grow in coffee from the mold in coffee, which are a big part of the Bulletproof Coffee recipe, these are proven to be mitochondrial respiratory toxins. So think about it like this. You have an iPhone, a brand new phone, and the first day you have it, it charges easily and it lasts all day long. And after you've had it for 6 months and you've charged and discharged the battery a few times, now it loses its charge at 3 p.m. Well, something is affecting the efficiency of the charge. And when you take toxins, the efficiency of the charge in the battery in your body drops. You simply can't hold the energy. You can't make enough energy all day long. So I talk very specifically, avoid toxins that are respiratory or mitochondrial toxins. The biggest one being toxic mold in your food, and in your environment. Breathing is really bad. And then sugar. Sugar is a short-term enhancer and a long-term destroyer of mitochondria. So you want to not have huge swings in blood sugar, and you want to avoid grains because grains both contain many of these toxins and they have their own toxins that cause inflammation. The other big one that is completely not talked about, but I talk about a lot in Headstrong, is light. Since now we've shown that mitochondria are light sensitive, we know that bright white and blue LED lights are like the corn syrup lighting. They're terrible for your mitochondria. They create stress in the eyes, a 23% increase in damage to the cells in the eyes. They trigger advanced macular degeneration at an earlier age, which is a mitochondrial disease. And the eyes are an extension of the brain. So when you basically torture your eyes with these white LED lights that you can buy for cheap right now that are supposed to be more energy efficient, they actually create cognitive stress. They actually create sugar cravings because your brain gets tired from the low quality light. You stress the mitochondria in the eyes, and the mitochondria signal other mitochondria with chemicals and probably with light that are deeper in the brain, deeper in the rest of the body, and you end up with fatigue because of poor quality lighting.
So that means turn off the gadgets.
That's interesting.
Turn off the gadgets and get rid of your indoor LED lights. Use incandescent bulbs, use halogen bulbs. These are more like sunlight. And I've just lost track. In fact, I just had one of the Bulletproof coaching students just said, Dave, I read the first chapter of Headstrong, and I'll send the first chapter to anyone. Go to orderheadstrong.com and you can get the info on that. He said, I read it and now I understand. Monday through Friday, I have intense sugar cravings and I'm tired when I come home from work at 5. I eat exactly the same thing on the weekends and I don't have any sugar cravings. It's like, it's the light in my office. So the next day he wore a baseball hat and looked a little dorky and some sunglasses indoors, and he didn't have his sugar craving.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I actually know a couple people who had mitochondrial dysfunction, and that's really a nasty thing for people to go through. It's actually life-threatening. But fascinating to watch what somebody has to go through when their mitochondria literally are not functioning properly, have to stay home, be on a ton of medications. They have zero energy. It's really scary. And I actually read a study that was really interesting as well, that when women it was done on women, it's probably anybody, but they did this study on overweight women, and when they were overweight and they were pre-diabetic, and when they first started exercising, it was really hard because their mitochondria were not functioning properly, right? And they were insulin resistant and had a hard time. But over time, over 4 months of cutting out sugar and exercising at a moderate pace, not intense, but just moderate, just enough where they could actually manage it, their mitochondria became more efficient. So I thought that was really fascinating.
10% of your body is the mitochondria. All right, before we run out of time, what are things you can do specifically to help them?
Well, aside from avoiding toxins, the way we talked about, eating more plants that contain polyphenols is terribly important. Polyphenols, we like to call them the antioxidants from plants, but they're actually signaling molecules to your mitochondria that do a lot more than just antioxidant function. And the most common source is coffee in our diet. It's a big source of polyphenols. One of the reasons it's in Bulletproof Coffee is not only does it taste good, it has that green tea, dark chocolate, and any sort of herb and spice, the brightly colored ones, those tend to have dramatic amounts. So use more spices and herbs, not the MSG stuff, but the real ones. Those are precious, and there's nothing stopping you from tripling the amount of oregano you use. And it actually matters for the mitochondria in your body. On top of that, just this avoiding fructose, high fructose corn syrup, avoiding processed foods is really important. And then switching to a higher fats, but higher, healthy, undamaged fat diet is terribly important. And if you can get into ketosis, it really helps. Ketosis is a fat burning mode. Normally you have to fast for 3 or 4 days or go on an extreme, like an Atkins kind of a diet in order to do it. But there are easier ways. Brain octane oil, which is one of the ingredients in Bulletproof Coffee, is known to increase ketones. When you can get ketones into your mitochondria, you actually turn down inflammation. And when you burn fat for fuel, you end up getting about 147 electrons. And electrons are the unit of energy that our body runs on, versus glucose or sugar, which gives about 36 electrons.
Interesting.
It's a big difference, and it turns down inflammation right away. So people feel the food cravings and sugar cravings go down within a half hour of getting some ketones present. And there's some more science about why that works. We can go into maybe in the next episode if it's helpful. But bottom line is, eating good quality fat makes healthy cell membranes and makes more energy in the brain. And you would see that in your clinics, Dr. Amen, right away. If someone comes in not eating toxins with ketones present, their brain's going to look different than if you have someone who's like a corn syrup margarine consumer or eating fried French fries at the restaurant every night. Right. Their brain's going to look different, right?
I'm not sure if I told you, but my granddaughter has a seizure disorder. And on a ketogenic diet, her seizures went away. I mean, she had 160 one day. And now it's sort of to modified Atkins, and she's done amazingly well. So, I just couldn't recommend Headstrong more. Go to orderheadstrong.com. You can read the first chapter for free, learn about Bulletproof and Dave's world. Is it bulletproof.com that people can go and learn about the podcast and all the other things your company does? When we come back, we're going to talk about one of the most important medical issues of our time. We're going to talk about mold and the brain. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tana and I are here with our friend Dave Asprey, author of Headstrong, available soon. You can learn more about it at orderheadstrong.com. Dave is the founder and CEO of Bulletproof, the creator of Bulletproof Coffee, the host of the #1 health podcast, Bulletproof Radio. And we are so excited to be with him. And when he came to see us many years ago, his brain looked toxic. And he, one of the big questions was, why does your brain look toxic? And part of it was you discovered that mold was in your home. And that led you on what has really become a crusade to educate the world about mold exposure and brain health and overall physical health.
And I'd like to know, Dave,
I'd
like to know how you, why mold was in your home, and not only how you discovered it, but why you figured out it was there. Because people need to know.
Well, as a kid, I had nosebleeds 10 times a day. And I would get frequent bruising for no reason. And I had rashes and asthma and behavioral issues like ODD and OCD and ADD and really all the symptoms of Asperger's, where I wouldn't make eye contact. I didn't know anyone's name. I read all the time and just a very big lack of awareness. The thing that was happening is that I lived in a basement that had been flooded and not remediated, but we didn't know. This was the 80s. No one knew. And I went to the doctor and they said, your only allergies are to cockroaches or something. Right. And it didn't make any sense. So I suffered a lot. And I would just have radical mood swings and I was just a kid, trying to grow up. And one of the things that does is that makes you fat, especially if you have certain genes that I happen to have. You can eat anything you want or nothing and you'll still be fat when your hormones are disrupted by these synthetic estrogens that are made by basically a soil fungus that has no business being in your home. And I moved out of that house and into another house that had mold and different symptoms would appear. And I eventually figured this out when I lived in a condo in the Bay Area. And after I moved out, when I had actually sold the place and come back to get some stuff, I went in to check a supply closet. And this was basically the neighbor's water heater. It had been leaking. And then all of a sudden, now I get it. The back of the wall in the bedroom was covered with black slimy mold, which is Stachybotrys. And when I lived there, we had water in the carpet, we picked the carpet up, we fixed everything, and we thought it was fine because I didn't know. And if only I had known about how dangerous water damaged buildings are, I would have just got the hell out. Because I'd lost 50 of my 100 pounds and I gained 30 of them back in 90 days after I moved in. And that was when I went to the doctor in Palo Alto and I said, I feel like I've been poisoned. I wouldn't hire myself. Something's wrong. And he basically said, maybe you should try and lose some weight. And it was the most meaningless conversation. I've worked out.
So he put the blame on you.
Yeah, it was because I was, not trying hard enough. And I had at least 15 different symptoms. And any normal Western doctor knows if you have more than 3 symptoms, you're a hypochondriac and you need Wellbutrin. And man, I was offended. I actually told the guy when he said vitamin C would kill me, I said, you're fired. He didn't know who Linus Pauling was, who was the father of vitamin C therapy, 2 Nobel Prizes. And I walked out and for 4 years, I just studied and I realized, wow, my symptoms line up with chronic fatigue, with Lyme, with mold, and with fibromyalgia. And after years of doing this, meeting all the experts in the field and reading thousands of studies and all of the books written about this stuff, it's very clear to me that all of those diseases are mitochondrial dysfunction caused by poisoning. And usually toxic mold is present before any of those other 3 diseases become chronic. There is no Lyme disease without toxic mold, not chronic Lyme disease. There is no CFS, there is no fibromyalgia without toxic mold. And there are a few experts who will disagree with me, but just give me their patients, we'll put them on antifungals, and you can always fix these people. And quite often what they require is mitochondrial performance enhancement. For me, what fixed my brain as well as my body was ozone therapy. And ozone therapy directly adds electrons to your mitochondria so they can get enough energy to start fixing their cells. This is based on the work of a guy named Dr. Schallenberger, who I feature in Headstrong. And Dr. Schallenberger has found that 48% of people under age 40 have mitochondrial dysfunction, and everyone over age 40 has it because we call it aging, and has focused on using, in this case, ozone therapy and some other oxidative therapies to turn on mitochondria. There are many different ways to turn on mitochondria, but bottom line is you've got to find a way to do that if you've been exposed to toxic mold. Get rid of the mold. And people can watch the movie at moldymovie.com. This is such a passion for me because it's not just me that's affected. 28% of people have genes where we get kind of permanently screwed up from mold unless we take specific steps to fix it. But for the rest of us, toxic mold triggers cancer, heart disease, in some cases diabetes, and it can just give you a lot of sugar cravings. So one of the couples in Moldy, the documentary, is a husband and wife physician couple. And she got sick and he didn't get sick when they lived in a moldy trailer as they were building their house, like disabled sick. She thought she was a hypochondriac, except her temperature was elevated. So she biopsied every organ in her body, and it's been 2 years of incredible pain and suffering and fatigue and tiredness. And eventually they figured out it was the mold. But the important thing is her physician husband was like, I believe her, but I don't feel it. The thing is, this mold, she was the canary, but if he lived in that house, his odds of getting cancer goes up dramatically. His odds of having allergies or strep throat or all these other things go up. So different people are affected differently. It's really important, though, that we understand if you suddenly see changes in your body weight that aren't explainable, in your behaviors, especially after water damage in your a water leak, condensation on the walls, you see mold in your bedroom, your kids go to a place or you go to a place and you feel really odd afterwards, there's at least half of buildings have water damage, according to the experts in the film. And this is one of the biggest sources of mitochondrial kryptonite out there. So I kind of feel morally obligated because I could have ended up with lupus or MS or cancer or dead had I stayed living in a water-damaged building. And even the house I live today had black mold when I bought it, and I knew it when I bought it, and we remediated before we moved in. So everyone listening here, if you're going to move into a new place, spend $300 or $400 on an air quality test so you know whether you're going to move into a place that has mitochondrial kryptonite. Because if you want to be headstrong, you want to have all this energy in your brain, the first thing you do is stop exposing yourself to kryptonite and then do the things that give you more power, then do the breathing exercises, then take a cold shower, then do all these other things that are in the book that are there for you to do. But why go to all the trouble of doing all that if the first thing you're doing is making yourself weak every time you take a breath?
Yeah,
so
I like that.
So where?
Yeah, no, and I like the idea that there's a simple test you can do. I know when I was selling a house, probably 15 years ago, the agent said, he came in and he asked, have you ever had a leak in your house? And they make you sign these documents. And you said it was because this new movement, mold is gold. And I'm like, what? He said, mold is gold. It's like this huge thing now. If people find mold in your house, it's like a quick reason to sue. So rather than saying, okay, make sure you fix everything that you think might have, been an issue with mold, it was like, let's make sure we cover it up. And I was like, okay. So the reason I'm telling people this is because you want to make sure when you buy a house that you're paying attention to where the house is. Is it an older house? What's the foundation like? Is it a condo? Like you said, you should be paying attention because people don't always disclose these things because they think they're going to get sued.
And the best way for people to check to see if there's mold at work or in their home is what?
It's called an ERMI test, Environmental Relative Mold Index. And you can order one from a local mold inspector, or you can go to myermi, myermi.com, and they'll send you a test kit that you can do at home. And what you do is you test outside air and inside air. And in my case, in one place where I was staying, we had, I think, 88 times more toxic mold spores in the kitchen than outside. And lo and behold, the dishwasher had been leaking. And that was all it took. And in fact, in that house, I got way worse mold and dairy allergies than I'd ever had before. And it turns out when you breathe toxic mold, some species will cross-react with gluten and casein and make your food allergies much worse.
That's so interesting.
That's so helpful. Well, Headstrong is such a good book. And also, we talked about Moldy, the movie, which will blow your mind. It's really worth watching if you're listening to us because you have symptoms of ADD, anxiety, depression, sugar cravings, brain fog, irritability. It's just one of the most important things to rule out, that because there's something you can do to fix us. Stay with us. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the brain at work. When we continue with Dave Asprey on the Brain Warriors Way. Welcome back, everybody. We're here at the Brain Warriors Way. I'm here with Tana and our good friend Dave Asprey, author of Headstrong, which is now available for pre-order, orderheadstrong.com. Dave is the founder and CEO of Bulletproof. He's the creator of Bulletproof Coffee. He's the host of the #1 health podcast, Bulletproof Radio, the author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Bulletproof Diet. And he's an entrepreneur. And he's the CEO of a fast-growing company. And I know you believe in brain health. You have it go throughout your company. In this podcast, I actually want to talk about the brain at work. And the CEO's brain, obviously, if it's not right, the business is probably not going to be right. But your best asset at Bulletproof is the collective brain health of the people who serve with you in the mission that you have. As you set up Bulletproof, how did you think about the brain at work?
I believe, based on my experience as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, as well as at Bulletproof, people often don't know this. The company that held Google's first server when they were just one server, I was a co-founder of the consulting part of that company. So multiple times in Silicon Valley, I've seen companies just go whoosh, whoosh, and take off. Even today, like some of the infrastructure that we're talking over is stuff that 15 years ago I was working on, which is just the coolest thing ever. So I look at how a company culture forms and how a company grows and presents itself to the world is a direct reflection of the CEO's energy and thus the CEO's brain. So if you are calm and grounded and focused and able to be the calm in a storm and to be non-reactive to things that are not worthy of reaction, that are worthy of thought and then strategic movements, your company will grow, your culture will flourish, and your people will trust you. And if you are instead a reactive CEO with ADD tendencies who yells at people and throws people around all the time without meaning to, by the way, you're not going to have the level of success that you're capable of. But more importantly, you're not going to have fun along the way. Mm-hmm. It'll be painful. That struggle we talked about earlier, you'll struggle all the time versus be able to make it happen effortlessly. I succeeded in my early career out of a fear of failure. It was like running away from these automatic negative thoughts that you write about in your books. And that can be fear can be a powerful motivator. It just sucks. So when you can turn that off and get your brain working right, what happens is the struggle goes away. And that's why I'm not just the CEO of Bulletproof. I'm also New York Times bestselling author and a Webby award-winning podcaster, a dad of 2 young kids, a husband, and I, even for my own brain health, really appropriate what we're talking about, I started like a CEO 5-day intensive neurofeedback thing called 40 Years of Zen that for me has helped me once I got my biology in gear with your scans and even with some of the recommendations in your huge number of books that really helped me. And then eventually there was like fine performance tuning with neurofeedback has been really meaningful to me, to the point that I wanted the world's best neurofeedback that I could find. We ended up making custom hardware and software in order to tweak my brain and to do it with a few other CEOs. And what I find over and over is all of us have mitochondrial dysfunction. We have brains that aren't working very well. And by the way, I sent everyone I talk to, Daniel, to your clinic to get a brain scan, because what's the point of trying to train your brain or even going to a meditation retreat if your hardware is running at half level? Like, any personal development you do as a CEO, as a business person, will not be effective if your brain is simply not on. And that's what you're seeing. So the advice that CEOs get when they go to the Amen clinics is priceless, because they get their hardware working. And you talk to them about breathing exercise, and you talk to them about heart rate variability and all this. And then if they're going to go do some performance tweaking or tuning, or go meditate or do any kind of personal growth that reflects inside a company culture, it's just easier to do that work when they've turned on their hardware and they've been able to see what's going on in a spec scan.
Oh, it's so true. It's interesting that you say that, Dave. One thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if you experienced this, I certainly did, before I got my scan, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, I don't know if I want to see what's inside my brain, right? Because I'm this perfectionist and whatever it was, I was like afraid to see it. But the truth is, it's only good news. Because if you are an executive or you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you're already as successful as you are. The only thing you're going to get is information on how to make it better. So, you just want to go in with that attitude that I'm going to learn information that's going to help me be more successful.
I was kind of terrified because I'm sitting here at business school and my brain isn't working very well. I'm concerned I'm not going to graduate. I'm thinking I'm dumber than all my friends.
Right.
And I'm like, what if this test validates all that? Right? That's actually not what it does at all.
No,
right?
not at all.
And it came out, I was like, oh, there's a hardware problem and I could do something. So what I do in the business in Bulletproof is we have a heart rate variability. Almost everyone in the company has a heart rate variability monitor. And this is kind of a low end type of feedback that when you change the space between your heartbeats, you take yourself out of fight or flight mode and into rest and recover mode, so that everyone who does the training I recommend in the company will be able to feel when they go into fight or flight mode and know how to take themselves out. So we can have meetings where people don't yell at each other. And then 15 of my top people have been through the full 40 years of Zen, $15,000 executive experience, which is a huge investment for a small company. And then we also have on-site clinical grade neurofeedback at our headquarters. So people can sit down, we do a custom brain scan. And here's the deal. I encourage everyone to do breathing exercises in the company, and people who read Bulletproof content or listen to the radio show and all that. Breathing exercises, meditation, anything that's going to make you more of what you are. It's important for far more than company performance, but it does help employee performance. And if we can add those tools in, so that if an employee is going to spend an hour of their precious life doing meditation, you might as well do it with some feedback so that you get more out of that hour. The return per hour spent is higher. So I'm totally fine if someone schedules an hour in the middle of their workday, they go into the neurofeedback room and they put the 24 channel thing on their head and they run custom protocols to address the parts of their brain connectivity that's most effective for them. Like, that's the best investment I could make, but they get to keep those changes for the rest of their life, whether or not they keep working for Bulletproof. So it feels like it's a really good thing. More return on their time for them, more return on their time for Bulletproof. And that's not normal, but yes, I believe it's not only ethical, it's a moral imperative to hack your employees' brains. I don't pick the settings. They get to decide what their brains are going to do, but I'll help them get the most out of their brain that they want to get out.
That's brilliant.
And do you have a story of how that has helped one of your employees, or how that has helped Bulletproof?
One of my top employees who actually just transitioned on, but has been an integral part of our growth, he actually started reading Bulletproof content. He got on Bulletproof Coffee, and he had been dealing with PTSD from his time as a veteran. And he actually came to the company and said, my brain is better now because of these things. And once he started, we got him hooked up with the neurofeedback, and he just had profound changes in his brain, to the point that it shifted his relationships at home, his ability as a leader in the company. And you see these just profound changes where people come in with procrastination, which is an unconscious fear. or they come in with sort of a passive aggressive attitude, or they like to send angry emails late at night, which is something I used to be very guilty of. And all of these behaviors, they realized at some point, they just naturally melted. Or if they're doing the full reset protocol that's in 40 Years of Zen, they actually go back and find a root trauma. And then they go through and then they sort of reprogram that. And what we're finding is that people can't do much meditation or brain training because they run out of energy. So when we do mitochondrial enhancement strategies from Headstrong, we get 2 or 3 times more intensive brain training before someone just hits the wall and they're just too tired. So the idea is fuel the brain and then do the work, instead of do the work and use willpower to make the brain go when there's not enough fuel. And that was a mistake that I used to make when I do my own brain training or meditation, was I didn't pay attention to my energy first. And so in the case of this guy, that combination was transformative on a personal level as well as on a company level.
I love that. So just to add some more validation to what you're saying, I actually have done heart rate variability training for a long time, but I've used it for a different purpose. It's been for athletic performance. And there's now, Olympic athletes use this, professional sports teams use it. Actually, a lot of them use it now. And it's really interesting the way they use it. So you can use it to actually train and work on your heart rate variability in the moment. You can also use it to see where you're at, so that you know how to train so you don't get hurt. I'm sure you know this already, but I use it to see where I'm at. How should I train to get the most out of it? But then also, if I notice that, say one day it's showing that I'm way down in endurance, then you have a plan that you can use to start to build that back up, to affect your parasympathetic system versus your sympathetic, which is probably on overdrive. And you start to learn how to manipulate it through being able to monitor it. You can see how to change it and how to work with it. And it's just fascinating. And I did that for my black belt test. I used it a lot.
So we are running out of time.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Black belt.
Dave is just a wealth of information, and you can listen to his podcast, Bulletproof Radio. You can get his New York Times best-selling book, The Bulletproof Diet, or pre-order his new book, Headstrong, at orderheadstrong.com. Dave, I hope you'll come back. It's just been great fun.
Always
to spend
fun working
time
with
you. And we are proud that you're our friend and excited for your success and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Tana. And for people listening, if you haven't had a spec scan yet to know what areas of performance improvement is possible for your brain, especially if you're interested in being a CEO or a leader or just a really high performance business person, or in some other part of your life, a musician, actor, whatever, you owe it to yourself to get your brain scanned at one of Dr. Amen's clinics. It is one of the biggest things that put me on the path I'm on now. And I honestly would not be sitting here in front of all of you today if it wasn't for this body of work. So it's thank you for your kind words about Headstrong, but for people listening, I truly don't know of something more important than understanding what's going on in your head. And you are the man for that.
Well, that's awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks,
my friend.
Dave.